When you've got a legal question, what's your first move? Let's be honest, it's not picking up the phone to call a lawyer. It's opening a browser and typing it into Google. But that very first step, that simple search, is going through a massive, fundamental change. The whole gateway to legal help is being rebuilt, and it's no longer a list of links, but a single AI-generated answer.
So imagine you type in a question like this. Something deeply personal, life-altering. You're probably stressed, you need information, and you need it now. For years, the deal was simple. You'd get a page full of websites, law firms, government pages, blogs, and you'd start the detective work, clicking through to find your answer. Well, that whole dance is pretty much over.
Because now you see this. Bam! An AI overview. It's this neat, clean little box right at the top of the page that just gives you the answer directly. Google's AI has essentially done the reading for you and is serving up what it thinks you need to know. And sure, it feels super convenient, but what we're really looking at is a seismic shift in how we find, and more importantly, how we trust legal information.
And this brings us to our first big idea. This isn't just some new flashy feature. This is the rise of an AI gatekeeper. Google is no longer just a directory, pointing you to potential sources of information. It's now positioning itself as the primary interpreter of that information, deciding for you what's most important.
This is basically pouring gasoline on a trend that researchers call a zero-click search. And it's exactly what it sounds like. Think about it. If the AI gives you an answer that seems good enough, why would you bother clicking on any of the links below? This means that for a whole lot of people, that AI summary isn't the start of their research journey, it's the beginning and the end.
So the million-dollar question is, how does this AI gatekeeper decide which sources to trust for its summary? Well, here's the kicker. It's not necessarily looking for the most detailed, the most nuanced, or even the most legally accurate analysis. It's an algorithm. It prioritizes content that's clear, direct, and structured in a way that's easy for a machine to read. Simplicity and organization are now beating out depth and expertise.
And as you can imagine, this creates a huge problem for the actual experts, the law firms. A recent study dug into this, trying to figure out why the very people with the legal training are suddenly becoming invisible in this new AI-first world. The study, which was detailed in the Harvard Journal of Law and Technology, took a hard look at 50 different U.S. law firm websites. They zeroed in on the pages that were supposed to answer common client questions and then checked to see if Google's AI was actually citing them as a source. And, well, the results were pretty eye-opening.
And this right here, this slide just nails the core of the problem. It's a fundamental disconnect. On the left, you've got what the AI is hungry for. Direct answers right up front, clear, structured Q&A, and signals that a real expert wrote it. But on the right, you've got what most law firms are actually serving up. These long, winding introductions, dense walls of text, and often no author byline at all. They're speaking a language the new AI gatekeeper just doesn't understand.
This whole thing is even more dangerous because legal information falls into a very special category that Google calls your money or your life, or YMYL. The name says it all, right? This is the kind of content that can have a massive impact on your life, your finances, your health, your rights. For these topics, Google's systems demand the absolute highest level of trustworthiness. And that's a signal many law firm websites just aren't sending.
But look, this goes way beyond a firm just losing a potential client. We are now wandering into a really complex ethical maze. Because when an AI summarizes legal text, who is actually responsible for what it spits out?
And as the researchers pointed out, the real danger is this. An AI summary can strip out the most critical context. That tiny little detail about an exception to a rule or the fact that a law only applies in one state. But here's the scary part. It delivers that incomplete information with a completely confident and authoritative tone. A person could read that and believe it's the whole story, and the consequences of that could be disastrous.
This just creates a minefield of new risks for lawyers. Suddenly, their own carefully written content could be twisted by an algorithm into something misleading. Their firm's reputation could be damaged if it's cited next to a bad summary. And maybe most importantly, these AI answers sound so conversational, they start to blur the line between general information and actual legal advice, giving users a totally false sense of security.
So, finally, we have to zoom all the way out and look at the biggest picture of all. What does this mean for access to justice? In a world where an algorithm is deciding who gets seen and who doesn't, who gets a voice and who gets silenced.
The tough reality is that optimizing your website for AI costs time, it costs money, and it takes a specific kind of expertise.
This creates what the study calls a distributive dimension. Basically, the big digitally savvy firms can afford to adopt. They get amplified by the AI. But what about that small local firm or that nonprofit legal aid group doing incredible work? They could become completely invisible to the very people who need their help the most.
And that brings us to the most powerful and honestly kind of chilling conclusion from this analysis. Google's AI isn't just a referral service anymore. By deciding which sources to cite and which to ignore, it is now acting as a gatekeeper of professional legitimacy. Think about that. To the average person searching for help, if you're not in that AI summary, you might as well not even exist.
So we're left with this enormous question. The front door to legal help is being rebuilt from the ground up by artificial intelligence, changing the very foundation of how we find guidance in our most critical moments. The real question we have to ask ourselves now is, who are we trusting to hold the key?